Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for clicking on my video. I really appreciate it. Today I'm talking about swag. So this is my first video in a video series talking about the history of like players' careers, sort of my biography in a sense of them, what I think about the player's career, a little bit about past events, and how I think about their career and sort of analogies that I think are interesting. So, Swag, of course, is a very controversial player. He's someone that is, in some ways, beloved and also hated. He's one of the subjects, one of the 5 players that were involved in the ibuypower match-fixing scandal. So, obviously, very controversial player and a very controversial career. I think a lot of people, when they talk about swag or they talk about these ibuypower players, there's a much richer history than they would let on to believe. So if somebody talks about swag or dazed or steel, 90% chance they're going to be focusing on the ibuypower scandal, unfortunately. Now, obviously the ibuypower scandal is an incredibly important part of not only Swag's career and not only Counter-Strike's history, but also esports history. It's a very important thing that esports fans should know about. It's just I think that it's been oversaturated a little bit in the context of just talking about Swag's career or these individual players' careers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the ibuypower scandal, but I want to focus on other things for this video. And at a certain point, we also have to move on. And when we talk about the history of these players, only talking about a single point, even if it is a very important point, is sort of disingenuous and ignoring other very important parts of esports history. So, Braxton, that is Swag's real name. He started playing Counter-Strike at the age of 7. That's what he said in an old interview where he was probably like 13 or 14 or something. And his older brother introduced him to Counter-Strike. So he's this little southern blonde kid. He's got one of them Texan accents kind of a thing going on. And he started in 1.6. So obviously he's been playing for a long time. Now, one thing that I just want to say, this is one of the theories I have as to why Swag is so good. Yeah, he is naturally just very talented, but another thing is just the time scale of how long he's played the game. So you start at 7 years old, and then you hone your skills until you become pro. So the average person becomes pro probably a year, or probably a couple years after, if we're being honest. 2 years after they start playing the game or start playing the game at a real high level. So the average person that's pro, they discover the game at 15, 16. They start playing for a couple years. They get pretty good. They get to the highest levels of matchmaking, play some S tier or whatever, and then they go pro and they get into a top team or like a tier 3 team or whatever the story is. But they generally get a couple years of practice, and then that's when they get their big break. Swag, he was blessed in the sense that he had 10 years, or I think he had 8 years before he joined joined a real pro team in Counter-Strike Source. So he was, I think, 15 when he joined, Jesus, what team is it? I don't remember, but it was an old team with, I think it was like Nothing and Sean Gares. So he had 8 years in that. Remember those like hyperbolic time chambers or whatever from Dragon Ball Z, where you like stick in it for a couple years and like you come back and you have like a 6-pack and like big ass delt muscles and like you're like super strong and shit and super fast. In a sense, that's what Brax had, because he had all those years to train and to hone his skills, and he's extremely skilled. Whereas if you were 17 years old or 18 and you discover the game and you join that hyperbolic time chamber, by the time you get out 8 or 10 years later, you are old. You're past your old, but you're definitely past your prime. You got a wife, you got 2 kids, you got a mortgage, you got a car payment to pay for, you got a full-time job, and you're not playing Counter-Strike anymore. You're done. Okay. Now and then, as for Swag's career, so he was playing online, and he got discovered, and he joined this team when he was 15 with like Sean Gares and nothing, and then this is in Counter-Strike source, and then I think they actually won a couple of NA lands, and he starts to look really sick. Like there's a lot of hype around him. Thorin, he had a video about Swag, and he compared him and his hype to nothing back in the day. But for me, I wasn't around in terms of watching Counter-Strike at that time, so most people don't understand that nothing was actually very hyped back in the day. As like he would be an all-time great star, superstar, megastar player in Counter-Strike Go. But it's more like the hype around Swag at the time was probably more like around Simple, before he cemented himself as like a real megastar when he kind of joined Navi and they won the major. So it was like his time during Liquid when he was just like dragging fools through the major and the group stages and almost winning with Liquid almost. So his squad, they go far in some tournaments and they win some NA tournaments, but they were never like the best team. They were just like a good team in the context of NA. And then they switch over to CSGO in 2013 and they get to the major. And remember, so even they switch to Go and they're still not considered like a top team. They were good in the context of NA, but not amazing at all. They had good aimers, Swag especially. Now they go. This is a pretty crazy story, one that kind of is a metaphor almost for Swag's whole career. Now Swag, the way I think of his career is he's like a warrior or a gladiator, and it looks like he's gonna slay the dragon, or maybe sometimes he does slay the dragon and he's about to go like reap his rewards, and all he has to do is walk over to the treasure chest filled with gold and diamonds and jewels and open it up. But while he's walking, he just starts running over to the treasure chest after he kills the dragon, and then he like drops his sword and he trips on it and then he stabs himself in the chest. So that kind of happens at this tournament. So they Swag's team, I think it was Complexity. So they get matched against they get through the group stages and they get into the bracket stages. So they get matched against the Russian team, which is the third best in the world, and it had Dosya. And remember, people don't give a shit about Dosya now, but at the time, he was one of the best players in the world, and that's why he cemented as one of the best Counter-Strike Go players of all time. He was sick at this time, and Astarna Dragons was right behind, like Very Games and NiP, and they were the third best team in the world. So definitely considered better than Swag's team. And so Swag and co, they match up in the quarterfinals against the Astarna Dragons, and it's a super back and forth series. But in the end, it's a really tough game. And then Swag, in his North American squad, they actually end up beating the Astarna Dragons, which is a really big upset. It's huge. So this is like nutty stuff. And remember, this is the first CSGO major, so the importance of this is huge for these guys. And Swag is still very young at this time. In fact, he's still young now, but the guy was, he's a little kid. And he's never competed for this much money before. So this is wild for NA, because they're beating this team of like sick Russian players. And they were all sick aimers too. So everybody's adrenaline's on high. They win this crazy game, where it's back and forth, and nobody knew who was going to win. And in the semifinals, they get matched up against Fnatic. Now, if I tell you Fnatic, you're going to think like, oh shit, it's like that amazing all-time great team. But not really. At the time, Fnatic was not considered very good. They were like okay, but they were not like a world beater or anything like that. And Fnatic just kind of destroys the Americans. Not because Fnatic was super sick. It was more like Swag's team that kind of They had like these weird strategies, and they just didn't look like themselves. It looks like Swag's team kind of beat themselves. It wasn't Fnatic beating them; it was them underperforming and kind of doing some stupid shit and falling on their own sword. So when the NA guys were at an all-time high, they thought that they they were running to grab that treasure chest. They killed the dragon. They slayed the Asana dragon, and then they fell on their own sword. And if they had just played their game, their normal game versus the Fnatic guys, CSGO history could be a lot different right now. We could have a North American major, the very first one, we could have the very first CSGO major with a North American winner on the books. That's a real possibility. I don't think they were the favorite. They would have been matched up against Very Games or NIP in the final. But if they had just played their game, they would have been on this crazy heater, and they could have done it. Now, as time goes on, Swag's lineups change slightly. They take people out, put new guys in. They make little tweaks, but they still keep going. And there's all this hype around Swag still. He's still very good, very skilled. I think the best comparison is like a simple. He wasn't an opper. One second, I'm sorry. So he wasn't an opper. He was a rifler. But he was a very good one. And when you watch his clips and his highlights now, he's got like these ridiculous traits about him, like his game sense and his aiming. They're like retardedly good. Like you can tell he's been playing the game forever. It really does show in his play. There's this classic clip where Mo's streaming and he's on Mirage, and it's I think it's like a 1v1 scenario clutch where I think Mo's defending the B site, and then he knows exactly where Swag is. He's in apartments overlooking the site, and it's this classic clip because you see Mo with this off angle where like nobody would ever pre-fire it, like some bizarre angle where if you pre-fire that angle, it's like that's like 1% of what's possible, and the other 99% is overlooking. So if you pre-fire that angle, almost every single time you're just getting killed from a different angle. But somehow Swag has like the foresight to know where exactly Mo is, and he just like, or generally where Mo is, so he pre-fires the angle, he misses, and then Mo's just standing there because he thinks like there's no way he's gonna keep shooting it, and then he shoots one more time and he gets a little bit closer to Mo and he freezes. He doesn't do anything because obviously it's not gonna hit Mo, and then somehow like the weird like crazy off angle pre-fire shot goes through the wall and hits Mo in the head, and he didn't even see Mo. He just like predicted that he was there, and so that's just like the example of Swag's like insane game sense. And then of course famously Mo went like nuts and he called him like a fucking amazing savant and like what the fuck just happened. So yeah, that's how like wild Swag's game sense is. It's ridiculous. It's not at the level of like a Cold Zera probably, because obviously he has, in my mind, some of the best game sense of any esports game ever. Like in esports, not just counterstrike or Counter-Strike Global Offensive, but for like a North American player, a star player, he's got all the game sense you need. And also his name is nutty. If you watch his highlights, he's got some of like the sickest highlights in the world. Now obviously it's still pugs and it's online, but if you use the eye test, which is I think the most important thing, if you use your eyes and you judge it for what it is, it's a pug and it's online, it still is. It's like robotic how quick and how like snappy his aim is, and he doesn't do the scream thing where like you do the snap and you get it on their head, and like you just try to get the one bullet headshot. He gets it like right where like their head and their neck is, and he does a good like 2 or 3 bullet spray, and he always gets the headshot, but he sprays because he's confident in the spray hitting, just in case for some reason. It's like he has very, very good headshot spray. And it's very quick and snappy. If you guys want an equivalent of what watching him is like, it's like watching Stewie 2K, after he became less puggy, after some development on Cloud9, because Stewie has that like pretty good aim, and he's got like this weird like game sense, but much better. It's like a much snappier aim, and Swag is almost like psychic sometimes. And he's also a very good clutcher. So in 1v1 scenarios and in 1v2 scenarios, he has a lot of nutty clips, and he was also very good in pro play. It wasn't just online like a Roka or something like that. He actually proved his clutch ability. So when people are clutch off online, I don't rate that very highly because a lot of the time it doesn't carry over. But Swag actually made it carry over. And he has a lot of like those wacky clutch plays too, kind of like a JW, where he does like the unexpected. I think there's also a clip of him, if you remember the simple play where he threw the op over the wall, and he killed a leash with the headshot with the P250. Swag has one of those clips where he throws actually a P250 over box and he gets the headshot in a similar way, which I thought was kind of interesting, and a little similarity between him and Simple, that they both have a clip like that. Okay, and also, just as another note, as a player, he was a lurker, and he was also very good on Dust 2. If you go back, and I noticed this because I watched Thorn's video in preparation for mine, a lot of his really sick professional clips were on Dust 2, and even actually a lot of his sick online clips, they're on Dust 2. So he's kind of a specialist on that map. He was very good on it. So I think he's the complete package, at least for a North American team. Like any North American team, almost any North American team throughout history would have sacrificed their left nut for this guy. Like seriously. Even like the classic Cloud9, the one that was making crazy runs, and the Liquid Squad that had those two really good major runs. Now, Swag, over his career, like I said, he made a lot of weird decisions. It's almost a joke because of the ibuypower scandal. But he made a lot of weird decisions over his career, and it's sort of a motif that repeated. And it was repeated especially through the ibuypower scandal, but it was especially blatant in the roster changes that he took part in. So at this point, he has a really good team, and everyone thought he was going to stay there. But like inexplicably, he goes to another team, and it's one that always shits the bed in international tournaments. So they were this team that he switches to. They were good domestically, but everybody knew they were going to be shit when they played the Europeans. And so in my eyes, that's like him falling on the sword. He has this good team, and then he switches over to this other team that's not going to do well, and he just stabs himself in the chest, and he's like, ah, shit, I'm fucked, even though he did it to himself. So Swag is in this team in the grind for, I don't even know how long it was, probably a year or so. And they look okay, not amazing. They win some domestic tournaments against North American teams. They have decent performances against EU, but they're never like great against EU. And Swag's still looking like a star. So they're not amazing. They're like classic NA. It's like the best team in NA or whatever. But eventually they go to a European LAN where they actually get to the final, and they start to look really sick. Like the hype starts to really build around them. And at this point, it almost seems like it's the hype is warranted, because NA teams always have a lot of people hoping that they'll do well versus the EU squads. But it looks like it's legit because they got to this final. And so everybody's wondering, like, how far can they go? Will they be able to come like a top 3 team or something? Swag looks amazing. Like, how good can he get with this squad? And then again, by some force of retarded nature, they have this bizarre roster shuffle, and Swag runs off to another team. And at this point, he had taken the sword out of his chest from before. He like healed himself up, He had gotten stronger than ever, and it looked like he was going to slay the dragon for real this time. He was going to do it. And then he falls on the sword again. And then he goes to the final. He has an amazing performance. And now he stuck his sword in his stomach, and he's flopping around. Now, this new team that he joins, it pretty much was crap. Aside from, who was that one player? For the most part, the roster had like very little skill, and it was a lot of just like shit players. Oh yeah, okay. So Nitro is on this team, but it's not the Nitro that you're thinking of now. It's the same guy, but it's original Nitro. So it's before he had all the hype, before he had really any hype, because this Nitro was a no-name Nitro. He was like some random guy that came out of nowhere, and for some reason he got on this team, and he was not good at the time. So that was kind of indicative of how this whole roster was. It was a roster of 4 shitters essentially, and it was Swag for some reason. I think he had friends on the team, and that's why he joined them. They had like one okay placing with his team, like a top 3 or something, but that was like literally it. And remember, this is all avoidable. Falling on his own sword is not someone else's fault. It's his sword. It's his fault. It's Swag's. Nobody forced him to join this shit team. It was all him. He stabbed himself in the chest. So at this point, some time goes by, and eventually he starts to figure it out. You know, I want to be a successful player. I want to join a real squad with skilled players. And so he gets pulled in this new team that's starting to form, and it's this super team with Swag, the super skilled rifler, good clutcher. You got Daze, the crazy in-game leader. You got Hiko, also a great rifler at the time. Yeah, you could say he's probably possibly the best CSGO NA player of all time. And then Ska, obviously, he was a very good opper. And there was a time when he was in legit contention for the best opper in the world. So they were about to make the squad of 5 superstar players, like 5 Power Rangers. And they're all going to save the West, and they're going to have that great scene where like all the Power Rangers like put their fists in the middle of the ring, and then like they have like these like rings on their fingers or whatever, and then like they slam them together, and then they all light up, and then they like jump into this morphing mecha suit that kills like all the big bad guys in Europe. And they were going to like become the saviors of North America. There's one problem, though. Remember how I told you guys that Swag's career is always him falling on his sword? Now, even though they have this big mecha suit of like the 5 crazy skilled players, or even like the in-game leader is pretty wicked with a rifle. This is when he gets banned for matchfixing. So they have this crazy mecha suit. All the 5 Power Rangers are in there. It's that thing where like they each like drive one part of the body part. So like one guy's driving the head, one guy's on the arm, he's got the sword, one guy's got the shield, another guy's in the leg or whatever. Swag and AZK fuck it up. They drop the sword, the mecha suit falls, they fuck up the joystick, and then the whole Gundam suit or whatever, it dies. Because Swag and AZK are banned, and this team doesn't come together when 2 of the main people, one of the star players, is gone. And if some of you don't know what the ibuypower scandal is, if maybe like you're not from CSGO or you're one of the very new fans of CSGO, basically this team with the players were Swag, AZK, Dazed, Skadoodle, and Steel. It was reported by Richard Lewis, and it was obviously all true, that the 5 players threw a match for skins. So they played a match, they lost it on purpose, and they bet on themselves to lose. So obviously that's illegal. Eventually Valve found out, and they were banned, and for life. So now, fast forward to right now, Swag is still banned. And Valve probably last year or somewhat recently released a statement reaffirming that ibuypower, the ibuypower guys, that's 5 squad of 5, except for Skadoodle because of reasons I won't go into, they're banned indefinitely, and they're not considering reviewing the bans. And a lot of the community wants Swag banned because he was like 17 years old at the time of the throw, and he was a minor. And there's a big debate that can go into this, but a lot of people want him unbanned, but he's most likely not getting unbanned. And so that's where we are now. In terms of the legacy of Swag, I say he's the 3rd best player. You can make an argument that like Elige is getting pretty close, but I think he needs to have more time under his belt of actually being a star player. And I think personally, it would have been the best if it wasn't for him classically falling on his sword all the time. If he wasn't banned because he was stupid and threw a match for skins, or if he hadn't made such stupid roster moves, or made weird team swaps all the time. I think if he had better squads around him for more of his career, they could have unlocked him more, because obviously if your team is doing well and you guys are winning more matches because your guys are fragging better, that unlocks you to play better too. But I can't judge people on what they could have done in like this imaginary simulation. I can only judge them on what they did do. So I personally am a fan of Swag. I think he could have been an all-time great. Not even in terms of just NA. I think he could have been, we'd be talking about right now, like, who are the 5 best Counter-Strike players of all time, and we'd say, like, I don't know, Coldzera, Get Right, maybe Device, and then, like, Swag is, like, in some people's lists. But obviously, I would never, at the moment, put him there. I just think if you run the simulation in your head, it's possible it could have happened. So I just want you all to imagine this as a final point. This guy was the 3rd best North American player of all time, and he reached that milestone by the time he was like 17 or 18, and he did it with all these weird roster decisions, all these weird roster moves, all these weird teams he played with for no apparent reason, and hopping around to weird teams in bizarre ways. Now imagine if we had Swag now. Imagine if he got unbanned, and he's still in his prime in terms of how old he is. He's not old. He's, what is he, like 20 years old now or something? He's not rusty. He plays a lot. He pugs a lot, and he grinds a lot. He plays a lot of Counter-Strike still. And he's still in that hyperbolic time chamber we've talked about earlier. And I think, at least I hope, at this point in his life, he's probably learned from falling on his sword so much. And he's older, and he's wiser now, and he's more mature. And before maybe the times he fell on his sword, it was a flesh wound. But the ibuypower time, that was probably really devastating for this guy. And I think, even though it's very hard for people to learn from their mistakes, and a lot of people don't change, I think the guy actually was young. And to me, I think if we put him on a team now, in 2017, late 2016, there's legit teams, and they have real infrastructure, and real coaching, and real organizations, and real veterans at this point that could really utilize this guy. And to me, it's sort of a fairy tale, but if he got him banned, the fairy tale of him like really performing and going balls to the wall with an NA team and really making it happen, I think it would actually materialize if he got him banned. And if he got into a roster that made sense. Obviously, if he picked some shit roster like he went into Echo Fox, it wouldn't. But I think if you can imagine it, I think it really would make you sad about the state of Swag and the NA scene because of how it's all panned out.